Hello Year 2, welcome to another one of your maths lessons. So let's start things off with some fluency. So what we've got today is we're looking at what happens when we times 0 by something. So when we do multiplication and 0 is one of our factors. But remember, there are two ways that we can look at multiplication. We can say that there are 0 groups of, let's say 1 for example. Let's work systematically in order. So 0 groups of 1. So here I've got 0 groups of 1. So that means that altogether I've got 0. Super. Let's try 2. So now I've got 0 groups of 2. Over here I've got no groups of 2. So altogether I've got 0. What about if I went to 3? 0 groups of 3. Well, I've got no groups of 3, so altogether I've got 0. Lovely. So let's do that again, but let's look at a different way of understanding multiplication. So we've said 0 groups of 3, but we could also look at it and say that we've got 0 this many times. So I could say I've got 0 one time. So if I've got 0 one time, altogether I've got 0. Super, let's have a look at what that would be with 2. If I've got 0 2 times, well, 0 add 0 is 0. Super. This time, let's do 0 3 times. So I've got 0 and 0 and 0, so altogether it's 0. So you might have noticed that when 0 is a factor, your product is 0. So have a look at these questions, pause the video and go through and write the answer to all these calculations. Okay, hopefully you're ready to go through some answers now. Well, remember, all of these calculations have 0 as a factor. So whether we look at it as 0 groups of whatever our second factor is, or whether we've got 0 this many times, our answer for all of these questions will be 0. Super. So what we're going to do this week is start to look at division. So this is an example of division. So there are 8 socks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I put them into pairs, so think about when you've got a pair, that means a group of 2. So if I put them into pairs, how many pairs will there be? So let's put them into pairs. So that means I've got to put them into groups of 2. Well, one group of 2 would be 2 socks. 2 groups of 2 would be 4 socks. 3 groups of 2 would be 6 socks. And 4 groups of 2 would be 8 socks. So if I had 8 socks and I put them into pairs or groups of 2, then how many pairs will there be? There'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs. So what we're doing here is we're saying 8, the number of objects that we're starting with at the beginning. So we started with 8 socks. 8 is then divided into groups of, and I was dividing it into groups of 2, 2, 2, 2. So I was putting them into groups of 2. So I started with 8 socks. It was divided into groups of 2, and that gave me 4 groups. So what we would say as a division is we would say 8 socks were divided into groups of 2, and that gave me 4 groups. So following our success criteria then. Today we're learning that division means grouping equally. Okay, so we're looking at division as grouping equally. So we would start off by saying there are so many objects. For example, there are 8 socks. and they can be grouped equally into groups of 2. And this gives us 4 groups. So then we would say 8 divided into groups of 2 equals 4 groups. Okay, and we're just going to leave that for the time being. So I just want to have a look at what we already know so far about this representation as a multiplication. So the last 2 weeks we've been learning about multiplication, and we've been learning that we could say that we've got so many groups of, so we could say that we've got 4 groups of 2, and altogether that would be 8. And today we're learning about how to write that as a division. So instead of having 4 groups of 2 giving us the total, we're starting with the total, we are grouping them up into 2s, and that is telling us how many groups we can make. What do you notice about our multiplication equation and our division equation? Super, so you might have noticed that they all have the same numbers. So we've got 8, 8, 2, 2, 4, and 4. But they're jumbled up in different orders. So this does not mean that they are commutative, because to be commutative, that means that we would have the same answer, and we don't. And remember, commutative means that it would also have the same symbol, which we don't. So what these symbols are is they are actually the opposite. So we would say that they are the inverse. Inverse. Super. So when we do the inverse, which is the opposite, just like when we do add or take away, they are opposites. Times and divide are opposites. So thinking about those relationships then between opposites, our biggest number is what comes first with our division, whereas when we multiply, that biggest number comes at the end. So let's have a look at some more examples of grouping equally. So there are 15 sweets. If I put them into bags of 5, how many will there be? Well, what we're saying is that there are 15 sweets. So that's the number that we're starting with. I'm starting with 15 sweets, and I'm putting them into bags of or groups of 5. So let's do that. 15 divided into groups of 5 equals how many bags will there be? Well, let's work it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So I've got 1 bag of 5. Now I need to make another bag of 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I've got 2 bags of 5 is 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 bags of 5 is 15. So if I have 15 sweets and I put them into bags of 5, how many bags will I have? Well, I will have 3 bags of 5. So let's have a look at this and writing it out as our division equation. So remember, when we do division, it's the opposite of multiplication. So when we do division, we must start with our whole. So this number here represents the total number of cookies that we're starting with. So I know that I will have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 cookies to start with. So I've got 16 cookies, and I am dividing them into groups of. So groups of how many cookies are in each of my groups? Well, they've all got 2, haven't they? So 16 cookies divided into groups of 2 equals how many groups of cookies? Well, I've got 1 group of 2 is 2. 2 groups of 2 is 4. 3 groups of 2 is 6. 4 groups of 2 is 8. 5 groups of 2 is 10. 6 groups of 2 is 12. 7 groups of 2 is 14. And 8 groups of 2 is 16. So that gave me 8 groups of 2. So remember, the first number represents the total number of cookies that I am starting with. The blue number represents how many is in each group. So 16 divided into groups of 2 equals 8 groups. So now pause the video and have a go at working out what this division equation would be. Lovely, well done for having a go. Let's go through the answers. So I can see that I've got 5, 10, 15, 20 stars all together. So that's what I'm starting with, 20 stars all together. And I am dividing into groups of, well, how many stars have I got in each group? That's right, I've got 5. So I've divided them into groups of 5. So 20 stars divided into groups of 5 equals how many groups? Well, 1 group of 5 is 5, 2 groups of 5 is 10, 3 groups of 5 is 15, 4 groups of 5 is 20. So I get 4 groups. When I do 20 stars divided into groups of 5, I get 4 groups. Super, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our original example of 8 socks. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a skill that we already learned in multiplication to try and work this out. And that skill is going to be skip counting. So what we're going to do is we're going to say there are 8 socks. If I put them into pairs, how many will there be? So I've got 8 socks. So one pair would be 2. There you go, 2. 2 pairs would be 4. 3 pairs would be 6. And 4 pairs would be 8. So what we did is we counted in our pairs, in our 2s, until we reached our whole amount. So 2, 4, 6, 8. That means I've counted in my 2s 4 times. So 8 divided into groups of 2 gives me 4 groups. Let's try that again with the sweets example. So remember, 15 is the number of sweets that I'm starting with. So 15 divided into groups of 5. Well, I know that one group of 5 would be 5. That's not 15 yet, so I'm going to add another group of 5, and that would be 10. So 2 groups of 5 would be 10. We're still not at 15 yet, so we're going to go again. 3 groups of 5 would be 15. So if I have 15 sweets and I put them into bags of 5, I know that I would get 3 groups. 1, 2, 3. Let's look at it with some balloons. So I have 10 balloons. I give some children 2 balloons each. How many children get balloons? So let's have a think at how we would represent this as a division. Well, when I do a division, I must start with my biggest number, my whole amount. Well done. So that means my whole amount of balloons is 10 balloons. And I am dividing it into groups of So how many balloons does each child get? They get 2 balloons each. So I'm dividing into groups of 2. And what we need to do is we need to work out how many children would be able to get balloons. So what we would do is we'd say, well, one child would get 2 balloons. So one child would get 2 balloons. If there were 2 children, that would be 4 balloons. If there were 3 children, that would be 6 balloons. If there were 4 children, that would be 8 balloons. If there were 5 children, that would be 10 balloons. So now I've run out of balloons. So if I had 10 balloons and I gave a child 2 balloons, how many children would be able to get them? Well, one child would get 2, 2 children, that would be 4, 3 children, that would be 6, 4 children, that would be 8, 5 children, that would be 10. That means 5 children would get 2 balloons each. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the same question, but instead of using a number line to show our skip counting, I'm going to show you that as an array. So arrays were really helpful, if you remember last week, for showing us that multiplication was commutative. Commutative. Excellent. So what arrays can also show us is they can also be a representation for division. So let's have a look. I have 10 balloons. So remember, when we do a division, the number that comes first is the whole amount that we've got. So that's 10 balloons. And I divide it into groups of, so I give some children, what's the day is it? I give some children 2 balloons each. How many do they get? So I'm dividing it into groups of 2. Well, let's look at that with an array. One group of 2 would be 2. 2 groups of 2 would be 4. 3 groups of 2 would be 6. 4 groups of 2 would be 8. 5 groups of 2 would be 10. So you can see from our array that 10 balloons divided into groups of 2 would give us 5 groups. There you go. So that's our answer to this question. Let's have a look at using the array model then for the loaves of bread. I buy 10 loaves of bread. I can fit 5 loaves into each bag. How many bags will I need? So I'm doing a division. My first number in my division equation has to be the biggest number in the equation. So that would be my whole amount of bread, which is 10. So I've got 10 loaves. And I am dividing it into groups of. So I can fit 5 loaves into a bag. So one bag is one group, and in that one group I can fit 5. So I'm doing 10 loaves divided into groups of 5. Well, then I know that one group of 5 would be 5. 2 groups of 5 would be 10. So I can see that if I have 10 and I put them into groups of 5, that would give me 2 groups. So let's have a look. I've got a division calculation here. Let's talk through what this division calculation means then. And don't forget that success criteria is around if you need to use it to help you. So the first number tells me that there are the whole number of objects. So 30 divided into groups of 5. So I know that I've got one group of 5, that would be 5. 2 groups of 5 would be 10. 3 groups of 5 would be 15. 4 groups of 5 would be 20. 5 groups of 5 would be 25. 6 groups of 5 would be 30. That's the number that I'm starting with. That's my whole. So if I had 30 and I put them into groups of 5, I would get 6 groups. Have a go at pausing the video and using the skip counting method to work out how many groups. If I had 18, could be 18 anything, 18 flowers, 18 cakes. If I've got 18 of something and I put them into groups of 2, how many groups would I have? So if you need a bit more time, keep the video paused, but let's go through the answer. So if I had 1 group of 2, that would be 2. 2 groups of 2 would be 4. 3 2s would be 6. 4 2s are 8. 5 2s are 10. 6 2s are 12. 7 2s are 14. 8 2s are 16. 9 2s are 18. So if I had 18 and I put them into groups of 2, I would get 9 groups. Lovely. Okay, it's time for you to have a go by yourself then. So the circle sheet then today is the division equation is there for you to fill in, but you also got this run through of what we mean by this division equation. So here I've got some sweets. There are 10 sweets. They are divided into groups of 2. So you can see that here. I've got my groups of 2. There are 5 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I need to do is I need to fill in this division equation. And remember, the first number in your equation is the biggest. It's the whole amount of things that you've got all together. So 10 sweets divided into groups of, so this is helping you with that blue, they're divided into groups of 2. And that gave me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. So that's what you need to do for the rest of this sheet. The semicircle sheet is an array for you to do the same thing, to complete our division equation. So 6 divided by 2. 6 represents the fact that there are 6 counters all together, and I am dividing it into groups of 2. So I can do that. I can say I've got 1 group of 2 is 2, 2 groups of 2 is 4, 3 groups of 2 is 6. So that means I've got 1, 2, 3 groups of 2. And I can fill that in here. There are 6 counters. They are divided into groups of 2. There are 3 groups. The triangle sheet is an opportunity for you to use your skip counting to help you. So 16 divided into groups of 2 equals how many groups? So I know that 1, 2 would be 2, 2 would be 4, 3 2s would be 6, 8, 10, 12, that would be 6 groups, 7 groups would be 14, 8 groups of 2 would be 18. I couldn't count on my other fingers because I was using the mouse, but you can either carry on that with your fingers, or you could just count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. That means I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups of 2. Here, would I be counting in my 2s? No, because I am dividing it into groups of 5. So I would count here 5. That would be 1 group of 5 is 5. 2 groups of 5 would be 10. 3 groups of 5 would be 15. And I would carry on counting until I reach my whole amount, which would be 45. And then the square is an opportunity for you to use your skip counting to work it out. So 14 divided by 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. That gives me 7 groups of 2, so my answer is 7. And then the last question is a true or false, where you need to explain to me If I had 25 and I divided it into groups of 5, would I get 6 groups? So you can use this sentence starter to help you. I know this is true or false because. As always, you can either pause the video on the slides of the sheets that you want to do, or you can find these on the home learning section of the Byron Wood website. Hope you all have a lovely rest of the day, and we will see you all for another lesson. Bye everyone.